Hi guys, and welcome back to another Player Spotlight. Today we're going to be focusing on the Miami Heat's second-year center, Bam Adebayo. Bam is a favorite of many. I guess it's a pretty interesting name, but also the way that he's been able to perform on the court has really captured the attention of Heat fans, of basketball fans, and of fantasy basketball players as well. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been getting the same amount of minutes that we all would like him to get. So we're going to dig into why that may be and what we can expect from Bam in the future. Let's just have a look at what he's done this season through 20 games. He's averaging 19 minutes a game as the backup center in Miami. He's leapt over Kelly Olynyk in the rotation, averaging 8 and 7 with 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks, shooting 54% from the field and 70% from the line. That gives him a true shooting of 60%, so a bump in efficiency from his rookie season. Good defensive numbers. The steal and block rates are both increased from his rookie year as well, so that's always a positive. And he is currently the 186th ranked player in fantasy, but over the last 2 weeks, he's jumped himself up to be a top 120 player in 20 minutes per game, largely on the back of the fact that he's getting a steal and a block per game in 20 minutes, which is obviously a really high rate, and shooting 53% from the field. But I guess what we want to look at is what is Bam's overall upside, and when are we going to get to that level? Well, he is a significant darling of the advanced stats and what he is able to do. In fact, when I look at my rudimentary model in terms of projecting guys' overall ceilings, he is one of the guys that surprised me as a top 25 player in the next 5 to 6 years. And it could actually, with some of the play we've seen from him this season, it could actually come a little bit earlier than that. Now, some of the on-off data hasn't been as favorable to him this season, and that could be part of the reason that he's not quite getting the minutes that we hoped. According to Jacob Goldstein's luck-adjusted on-off, the Heat are 8 points per 100 possessions better off with him on the bench, as opposed to Hassan Whiteside, where it's his on-off is plus 9.5 in the luck-adjusted number. So that's important to know. Last season, Adebayo had Whiteside pretty convincingly beat in that area. And Bam's been coming off a couple of pretty decent performances of late. Whiteside still is outperforming him, though, in the overall advanced numbers for this season. So I guess that's something you could pay attention to as to why he hasn't leapt over Whiteside that we thought he may do. On the Basketball Reference on-off numbers, though, Bam Adebayo's numbers are significantly better than Whiteside's. He's a +8, whereas Whiteside's a -3. So different ways of measuring it. The luck-adjusted stuff is something that I'd probably pay a little bit more attention to. But we're here to talk more about Adebayo rather than Hassan Whiteside for this point, and I feel we're going to be looking at Bam as a starting player heading into next season. Would be my guess that he is going to take that position. Now, of course, if Whiteside gets hurt this season, which has been a relatively frequent occurrence for Whiteside throughout his career, I would think that Bam would start, and I would think there's probably a 30% chance that he doesn't give the starting job back. Now, the Miami Heat at the moment are obviously struggling. Do they look to develop a guy like Adebayo, but would they like to also placate a guy who's a notorious shitbloke in Hassan Whiteside that could create locker room issues? We know that hashtag Heat culture is always a big thing for Miami, so there's that, I guess, delicate balance that we have to really pay attention to. But I think that Adebayo, if he does get that opportunity this season to become the starting center due to injury to Whiteside, I don't think he will necessarily give it up. I think we're looking at probably in about 4 to 5 seasons that he reaches his absolute peak, which could be as a top 25 guy, a 29 minute per game sort of a player, a guy that can average 11 boards, 18 points, 1.5 steals, 2 blocks, 3 or 4 assists, because his passing is better than what you may anticipate, despite just averaging 2.3 assists per 36, which is actually down on last season. I think that he can step up that passing and he can get that efficiency going. He's actually down in his free throws this season, 72 last season, at 70 this season, so there is some room for improvement there for Bam, but his value comes from that ability to get steals and to get blocks. Think of like a Nerlens Noel type of player who had immense fantasy value by being able to get huge block and huge steal numbers. Adebayo's that sort of guy as well, but a player who has a playmaking ability, a strong rebounder, and a little bit of a scoring touch that you may not see with someone like Noel. Over the last 7 games, he's bumped his usage up to 21%. Now, in some of those games, there's been no Goran Dragic, so he's taken on a little bit larger of an offensive role. But if you're in any sort of dynasty format, I think you need to be looking at him as a lock top 50 player in the next 3 to 4 seasons, and possibly even higher with that top 25 ceiling. I'm not saying you give up a top 50 guy, because people may not be as hip to the excitement that can be Adebayo as he moves forward, but someone who has a little bit more creation than what you'd expect as well. Just in the 72nd percentile in terms of shots assisted, according to Cleaning the Glass, meaning some of that is offensive rebounding as well, but also just a little bit of self-creation, some dribbling skills, and the ability to create for others, which is something that we didn't necessarily see from Adebayo during his time in Kentucky. Really high steal rates, really high block rates, the high rebound rate. I think Bam has an opportunity to be a really solid fantasy player for seasons to come. Now, if we look at where we got him projected for this season, I've got him as a top 180 player for the rest of the way. There are going to be stretches where he's a top 100 player, and then stretches where he's outside the top 200, depending on how the minutes go. But the increase in defensive numbers, efficiency is all trending in the right direction, really commensurate with what we see quite often with second-year players. And Bam is taking that step forward, as we would have hoped, just that the minutes aren't quite there. A positive defensive box score plus, a big one in fact, at 2.5 in his defensive box score plus minus. He's taken his PER up to almost 18. A pretty strong offensive rebounding rate as well, which is something that shows his ability to hustle and get those offensive boards and overall rebounding stats as well in fantasy. So I think that we should be looking at Bam as a starter next season, would be my estimation, maybe a 26-minute per game guy who then peaks as a 29-minute per game guy in probably the 2022 type of season, and that pushes him into the top 30, top 25 type of a range. Again, if I had to guess his peak ceiling in terms of numbers, I'd look at him as an 18 and 12 player with 4 assists, 1.5 steals, and 2.1 blocks, shooting 55 and 75 as his percentages. Can he develop a three-point shot? That's something we haven't really seen yet from Adebayo. Hasn't happened at this point. Doesn't take a huge amount of mid-ranges, but so far this season, 30% of his he's hit 30% of his mid-ranges, 24% of his shots have come from there. So these aren't really high rates of conversion. So I wouldn't be holding my breath for him to develop a three-point shot. And if it's going to come, I think we're probably 4 or 5 years away from him being able to add that into his toolbox. It just doesn't seem like it's quite there yet. It wasn't really able to do much with that last season either, and I don't think he's barely even attempted a 3 this season. I'll check exactly how many 3s he has attempted. He's attempted 3 threes this season, hasn't hit any, and last season he was 0 from 3. So we are a long way off Bam being a 3-point shooter, but all the building blocks are there for him to move forward and become a really excellent fantasy option. And you should be viewing him as not necessarily a foundational piece, but pretty bloody close to it with this top 50. I don't want to say guarantee, but it feels like it's pretty close to a guarantee that he can get to that value. It might not come until, say, February this season. But with the Heat, as I said, the Heat continuing to really struggle. They're 7 and 12 at the moment, currently locked into the 11th slot in the Eastern Conference. The Heat aren't massive tanking fans heading into a season, but if things start to go wrong, they will happily tank their asses off in order to get themselves a better draft pick. We've seen that in the past, that year when they grabbed Justice Winslow. They were pretty aggressive in the tanking stakes then, and Hassan Whiteside could be moved out. He could be moved out of the starting lineup. He could be moved out of the roster, but there are a few other intangibles that we do have to pay attention to, most notably the issue that Whiteside can have in that locker room, or just unsettling people in general. But it's been a good step forward for Bam this season, taking some big strides. We want to see a little bit more in a few areas, especially the passing, and we need the shooting to improve. But enough positive signs from Adebayo that we should be looking at him as a really strong fantasy piece who is probably got an outside chance of being a top 150 guy for the rest of this season. But from next season on, I would say top 100. is almost a lock for Adebayo, as he looks to be Miami's starting center of the future. Now, Whiteside does have one more season left on his contract, so maybe this gets pushed back one more season. But I would imagine that Bam is in that starting lineup, or if he isn't starting these, he's playing 24 or 25 a night relatively regularly, which is what we could be seeing from February on this season as well. So Bam Adebayo is your player spotlight for today. A very, very high upside dynasty player, a top 25 ceiling, probably a top 60 floor in the next 4 to 5 seasons, with a guy who can contribute in multiple areas. And if he takes a big offensive step and becomes a 20-point per game guy, then the top 15 is a realistic proposition, because those steals and blocks are fantastic, and he has the passing acumen to go along with it. So Bam Adebayo is your player spotlight. If you can try and acquire him for any sort of value, I'd be really looking to do that in dynasty leagues. And there's a small chance he has some 12-team value for this season.